the other thing that happened was I realized I wasn't a victim at that point. I had survived. I'm a survivor. And I was going through the process of trying to walk through some healing. So when I changed the story I was telling myself, I was no longer a victim, but I'm now a survivor. When you change the stories you repeat inside your head, it really does change your outwardness and how other people see you. So I became from an outward perspective, very strong.
Hey, Queens. Yeah, you know who you are. God, come on. Go ahead and put that crown on your head. Now tilt a little to the left. Now a little to the right. Perfect. Now let's get to work. Because we know you got big goals. And you got big dreams and not afraid to let them know. Why? Because you step into your purpose. You speak out on your faith. And you shift up in your journey. Because you a boss. Welcome to the podcast Drop the Expiring Act with your host Veli of QueenBayGoals.com. Reminding you that you are a queen before anything else. It's your life and your goals. Make it royal. All right, y'all. Go ahead and work that crown. All right. Hey, Queen Bays. Welcome to another episode of the Drop the Expiring Act podcast. Today, we are talking with Terri Kozlowski, who is an entrepreneur, blogger, and a life coach. And she's also the author of the book coming out called Raven, Transcending Fear. Now, I know I've told you a lot about Terri, but I want Terri to give us a little bit more about herself.
Well, I come from a Native American background. My mother is 100% Native American, born in a little village at Fort Yukon, Alaska, 8 miles inside the Arctic Circle. And when she came into what she calls the white man's world, a lot of her identity was stripped away from her. And she ended up being an alcoholic. And when she married my dad was literally on his way to Vietnam and was not believing that he was going to be coming back. So, but he did, because obviously I'm here and I have a younger sister as well. So my mother was an alcoholic from an early age. And because of her alcoholism, my parents divorced and I ended up having a traumatic episode with her. My sister and I were visiting her in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she got drunk and she got high. And she sold my innocence to 3 men so that she could have drugs.
Wow.
So she stood in the corner with her best friend watching these 3 men rape me so she could have drugs. So then she disappeared for 3 days and then came back and told us it was time for us to go home. Literally put our suitcases out on the front stoop and closed the door and locked the door, and that was it. So I had to figure out how to get my sister and I from Albuquerque, New Mexico, back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So went through, called my dad, got plane tickets, all that good stuff. But when I landed and got off the plane, my dad went to give me a hug, and I just stood and stared at him and said, I need counseling. Mm-hmm. I was, from a very young age, I was 11 when this occurred, very aware, very present, and had a very strong connection, spiritual connection with God. So I went for 5 years that I was in there. I was in therapy till I was 18 and realized that it wasn't at the time, because this was in the early 80s. Okay. This really wasn't something that was all that beneficial to me because it was new. Now you go into therapy. If you have a child that's been sexually abused, you put them into therapy, and there's all kinds of wonderful things that they are able to do now and help with now. That wasn't quite available yet when I was going through my stuff. It took me until I get to college to have somebody tell me that I was getting something out of being a victim. And it shocked me, but it also made me think, because why was I telling people I was a victim? I had technically survived what happened. And I was, I graduated high school, top 10% of my class. I got into college, was doing all the right things. But there was something about the victimology that stuck with me. And what I realized it was, through this absurd comment from this person was that I did like some of the benefits of how others treated me.
Oh, okay.
Because I was a victim. So I wanted to be left alone. And when you have that victimology, they are very careful around you. They speak softly. They don't yell. They just let you be. So I got something out of it. Now, the other thing that happened was I realized I wasn't a victim at that point. I had survived. I'm a survivor. And I was going through the process of trying to walk through some healing. So when I changed the story I was telling myself, I was no longer a victim, but I'm now a survivor. When you change the stories you repeat inside your head, it really does change your outwardness and how other people see you. So I became from an outward perspective, very strong. And I could get up in front of 600 women and talk about what had happened to me and not be emotionally upset about it. But at the same time, there was still a part of me that was very, very fearful. So when you talk about putting down, stopping the act, I continued to act really strong, despite the fact that inside I was still having issues, because you don't overcome everything along the way. And although I think for me, the sexual trauma was not as significantly harmful to me as my mother abandoning us. And she abandoned us not only physically, but had been doing that emotionally since we were little because of her alcoholism. And so for me, I always believed everybody was going to leave me.
Oh, okay.
That's what happens. So when I gave birth to my son, everybody's all excited and, you look at this loving little baby and I'm thinking to myself, he's going to grow up and leave me. I'm holding him 4 hours after he's born and I'm thinking this very sad thought. Now, it's true. He did grow up and he did leave, but that's technically what he was supposed to do. Right. I did a good job with him and he's thriving, he's doing well in society, all that good stuff. But that initial thought that everybody's going to leave me. And when you're abandoned, whether it's from a physical perspective or emotional perspective, that abandonment is very difficult to overcome until you can figure out for yourself how to be what it is you needed. And my mother could never be the mother I needed. She was the mother I had. And despite all her own issues, it wasn't what I needed. So I had to figure out how to mother myself to a place where I could release her and forgive her, and then forgive myself because the other part of that is forgiving yourself for allowing your trauma to continue. So I was 40 years old and it occurred to me that I was still suffering and I was upset that I was still suffering. And at that point, I realized I was causing my own suffering at this point. I had not had a relationship with my mother for most of my adult life. And any of the tapes that her voice playing in my head was me playing those tapes. She wasn't turning them on. She wasn't calling me and repeating things. None of that was occurring. So it was me that was allowing those old tapes to play. And I had to figure out how to reframe those tapes in a way that I could play them and not end up being fearful, not end up being traumatized over and over and over again, because that's what happens with trauma survivors. We relive over and over and over.
Right. So what did you think happened that gave you that mindset shift? Like, was it talking to somebody or you just had like an epiphany?
I was doing a lot of reading of Deepak Chopra. And a lot of, I had gone through when I was pregnant, Codependency No More. So I understood the alcoholism and being codependent and how that played into my understanding of I was taking care of my mother. I was taking care of my baby sister, and how all that caregiving was something that I was taught to do as a defense mechanism so that I wouldn't deal with myself. So over the years, I had taken in what I called stray cats, those people that come into your life that are so messed up and you think you can help them. And you go in and you're all excited and you're going to help them, and you don't help them. What happens is you do what you can for them, and they do whatever it is they're going to do. But what's really happening is you are postponing your own work, your own inner work. So when I was about 35, I started really getting deep into my own inner work and working through those things. And when I hit 40, it was the epiphany through the reading of several of the books that I was reading at the time that made me realize, Buddha's famous saying is our thoughts cause our own suffering. And I understood the light bulb went off and I understood, yep, that's exactly it. Nobody else is in my head telling me these things.
Right.
I'm the one doing it. And now I have to figure out how to change how I talk to myself. So that self-talk was the next component. It is very difficult when you've had 40 years of these tapes playing in your head, and the way you talk to yourself, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. Anytime you put shouldn't in your sentence as you're talking to yourself, that's a clue that you should stop doing that.
Right.
Because those shoulds and those coulds are what the ego uses to keep us small. The ego uses those terminologies so that we won't take a leap of faith and move forward, that we will stay within our little compartment, that our little safety zone, our comfort zone. And that's where the ego knows that it can be safe. And yet true living and true thriving, you do outside your comfort zone. It's one thing, a lot of people say through the pandemic, being at home a lot has caused them to really think about their day-to-day lives. And part of that is, what is it that we're saying to ourselves? What is it that we're really doing with our time? I had a friend who said she wanted more time with her kids, and guess what?
She got
it. She's home, you have to homeschool now. She got the time. So sometimes it's figuring out, okay, now that I have this time, how am I going to spend it with my children? Am I going to rant and rave because I'm not a teacher? Or am I going to figure out how to sit with them and help them learn these things in a way that maybe isn't teacher-student oriented? So,
do you feel like that's how you got into being a life coach?
I got into being a life coach because I kept being asked by others.
Okay.
Well, you could help me. And I would just talk to people. And at one point, my dad said, well, what credentials do you have? So I went and got some credentials because, depending on the age bracket that you come from is whether or not, is my life experience worth something? Yes, my life experience is worth something. Is my personality the type that is willing to share and give? Absolutely. But there are some people that say, what are your credentials? My dad's one of them.
If it isn't our dad who pushes us. I was raised by my dad, so I know. So do you transcribe to affirmations? Because I know you say it's a lot of the self-talk that we have and we're giving ourselves. Do you transcribe to, changing your daily talk by using affirmations?
Yes. One of the things that Deepak Chopra talks about is mantras, and in his 21-day meditations, he talks about using mantras. So I took some courses from him, and I have some mantras that I use. But also, whatever your faith is, I am statements are extremely powerful statements. So from a biblical perspective, the I am is direct reference to God, and using I am statements, and we use them all the time. I'm tired. Right. I'm really tired today. Okay. Well, now you are speaking self-defeating things to yourself instead of saying something like the fact that, I'm going to take it easy today. That's very different than saying, I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's those little slight changes in how we speak to ourselves. So yes, I have what I call my I am statements that I do every single morning. They're actually on the corner of my computer. I open them up and I go through my I am statements. Things like I am a master of time. I am always in a constant flow state. Those types of things, so that we're not saying I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. I'm never busy. I'm a master of time. I'm always in a flow state, which means that anything that I'm doing, I'm fully present for. and I'm giving my full attention to it, because in that moment, that's all that there is.
Right. I love it. I have to try affirmations. Affirmations is on my list of things to try because I like to do like 21 days of something new. And I have affirmations as my list of one of those. So I just wanted to hear another perspective.
I actually wrote an article earlier this year. I think the first article of the new year, I talk about affirmations. I don't talk about resolutions. The first 4 weeks of the year, I was talking about habits and the different ways that we can better ourselves, and never use the word resolution.
Oh, that's a good one. I don't like to use that word either.
Well, people have a negative connotation about it because they always think they're not going to actually complete them.
Right. I love it. So how did you get to writing your book now? Is this your first book or?
It is my first book. And if you would have asked me prior to 2018 if I was ever going to write a book, it was not just no, it was hell no.
Oh.
And I've had people ask me over the years about my story, because I'm more than vocal and more than willing to talk about it. But actually writing it down, I didn't want to do. And for two reasons. One, my sister is 11 months younger than I am. And she went through a lot of this with me. And my mother was still alive. And I always deep down believed that we would reconcile. And she passed and we didn't. So she passed in 2012. And in 2018, I became pregnant with a book. So much so that I spent about 6 weeks learning how to write a book. And then I spent 8 months writing the book. And then I took some publishing classes and that kind of stuff. So in 2020, the beginning of the year, I went through editing, lots of editing. And then in October, I got a book contract. So the book will come out March of this year. It's called Raven Transcending Fear. And it's my story and the process I went through to go from a state of fear all the time to transcending that fear. And now it's very rare that I'm fearful. I woke up last night fearful, though, because there was bad thunderstorm. And
it was horrible here.
it sounded like there were explosions coming outside my window. And I was kind of like, this is rude. So, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, my kids came. They ended up in my bed by this morning. Yeah, it was bad last night. So your book is coming out in March. I love that you said, in 2018 or before 2018, it was a no, like a hell no, this isn't happening. And then you kind of changed. What did you think made you decide, okay, now it's time, now I'm going to write this book?
It was a deep down spiritual knowing that I was going to be able to help somebody with that book.
I love that.
My story was going to help others. And anybody that I've actually sat down and talked to and told my story to, it has helped them on some level. Even if it's just that, my life is nothing like hers, so I can do this. So giving people encouragement, because knowing that other people are worse off than you were makes you feel a little bit better. And seeing that somebody who had very little to try to move forward with was able to do it from nothing external. This all comes from internal work. And that means everybody can do it.
I love that. So what do you say to the person who is still, they have a story inside of them and they're fearful, like, what is everybody going to say about my story? Like they're fearful of that judgment, or they just don't know where to start. What do you say to that person?
The one thing I did was I wrote a little bit at the front of the book where I'm clearly telling everybody this is my story. Those people that I write about may see things differently. And that's okay. I'm not arguing with that. This is my perspective and how it affected me. So that's number one, because you can always tell your story, and from that perspective that I'm telling you, other people may disagree with how I say this, but this is my perspective. This is how it affected me. So I did that. The other aspect is I had a sit down talk with my sister, which was the only other person that I really was concerned about. I had a sit down talk with her, and very heartfelt. And we hadn't done it since I was probably 14 or 15 years old, talked about what actually happened.
Right.
And in doing that, there was healing for both of us and realization that this was something I needed to do. And she was okay with it.
I love it. So where can we find your book when it comes out?
It's going to be on Amazon.com, or you can go to raventranscendingfear.com, or my website, terrikozlowski.com, and they'll all be there.
And you also have a podcast that I want you to share. Tell us about your podcast.
My podcast is called Soul Solutions, and it was because my son said that, Mom, everybody has a podcast. You would reach different people. And I found out that I am reaching a completely different audience than who I knew I was speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
So the new audience is, 10, 20 years younger than the audience I initially was writing the book for. So I've reached out, and that is doing well. I launched that end of August. So Soul Solution, it's everywhere. I just had an interview with Listen Notes that you can find on listennotes.com.
Okay, I'll check that out. So thank you. So I always like to end our podcast with a quote, and the guests are given the quote. And I love this one because you also have it on your website, and it's always moving forward. So Tell us why that's a quote that you live by.
When my husband and I were in a what I lovingly call a biker gang. He has a Honda Goldwing motorcycle, and we rode around with a bunch of friends. We were the biker gang leaders, and it was something I started telling everybody, we're always moving forward. Don't look back. We're always moving forward. And when you're riding a motorcycle, you can't look back.
Exactly.
You have to look forward, and you have to look not just right in front of you, but you have to look in a broader perspective. So in always moving forward, even if you fall flat on your face, you're still moving forward when you fell. And it's understanding that as long as you are taking action, as long as you are taking little steps, baby steps every single day, you will get to where you want to go.
I love it. So that was so perfect. So that was a perfect wrap for this episode, you guys. So make sure you check out her book that's coming out in March called Raving Transcending Fair. It's available on Amazon, and all her links to her website, her podcast, everything will be down below. So you guys don't have to go searching. Just look below for all the links. Thank you, Terri, for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. I had a great time.
All right, thank you. All right, guys, so make sure you come back and listen to the next episode of the Drop the Aspiring Act podcast. You have been listening to another episode of Drop the Aspiring Act. If you're looking for more information of this podcast and other episodes, please visit queenbaygoals.com. That's